All right, guys. So we're back. Going to do a couple more review videos from the stuff that we were learning just up until the quarantine, just to make sure that you guys are on the same page before we introduce anything new, which we are going to be doing shortly. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys about the Marshall Plan and the Berlin Airlift, which are things that we've already covered, but they're important moving on through the Cold War. So, first thing that we need to understand is who George Marshall is. George Marshall is going to be the Secretary of State, but he also was a general in World War II. And after the war, he toured Western Europe, and he had noticed that these cities and these countries that were in ruin and in rubble, um, they needed help. They needed help really bad. There was a lot of homelessness. There's famine, and what we're afraid of is that those countries and those people are going to turn to communism to try to help them get through those hard times. Now, that might have been a question you were wondering about earlier. Why would anybody choose Joseph Stalin and communism over capitalism in the United States? Well, if you're somebody that had just had their home destroyed or their whole world around them destroyed and everything is in rubble around you, you have no job, you have no home, you don't have a steady, supply of food, and someone promising you communism comes along and they say, "Hey, look, I can't guarantee you that or tell you that you'll ever have a lavish lifestyle, that you'll ever be, at the top of the food chain, but I can guarantee you that you'll always have a job. I can guarantee you that you'll always have food on your table, and I can always guarantee that you'll have a roof over your head." Now, it's not going to be the best of any of those things, but you'll have it. Now, for a lot of us, especially in the United States, that's not going to cut it. We don't want that mediocre or lower end lifestyle. But for somebody who has just had their world destroyed around them, that doesn't sound too bad. Okay, and that's what George Marshall and the United States are worried about. Is those countries in Western Europe, um, adopting communism so they could get somewhat back on their feet. So we need to combat that. Okay, and George Marshall in the United States present a plan that we'll later refer to as the Marshall Plan that is going to pump billions of dollars into Western Europe and other areas in Europe. We're going to even extend our hand to Eastern Europe as well. Um, but yeah, so we give billions and billions of dollars, roughly $15 billion, to rebuild Europe. And is it a humanitarian thing? Absolutely. But is there other motive behind it as well? Absolutely. We hope that by giving this money and helping rebuild Europe, that those countries in Western Europe will follow us in our democratic, capitalistic way of life into the Cold War. And when it comes to choosing sides between the United States and the Soviet Union, well, we will have those countries on our side. So within 4 years, we're going to see these countries that received aid from the Marshall Plan increase their industrialization by 41% when compared to years prior to World War II. We're going to see exports start to go on the rise. We're going to see economies start to stabilize. And that's great for the world economy and for the United States because these countries are going to follow the ideals of capitalism and democracy moving on into the Cold War. So, one of the first major standoffs that we're going to see in the Cold War is going to be in Germany. Okay, and then to understand this, we have to go back to a conference in 1945, the Potsdam Conference. And the Potsdam Conference was a conference between the United States, Harry Truman, okay, Winston Churchill from Great Britain, and Joseph Stalin from the Soviet Union. And at this meeting, they sat down and they discussed what are we going to do with Germany. Germany has been a thorn in our side, a pain in our butt, really since 1914. Okay, 1914. So for the last 30 something years, they've been a problem. What are we going to do? I know in class I usually compare Germany to being a troubled kid in class, and this conference is me and the principal and the dean sitting down to talk with this parent or to talk with each other and say, what's the plan going to be? What are we going to do to move forward here? And what they decide to do is to divide Germany into 4 different occupation zones. Okay, one zone being controlled by the United States, one being controlled by Great Britain and one being controlled by France. And then lastly, in the East, one being controlled by the Soviet Union. Okay. Eventually, we're going to see the groups or the zones in the West combine into one democratic group. And we're going to see, obviously, the ones in the East remain under communist influence. Now, something that's really interesting about this is that in the plan, they also split the city, the capital city of Berlin, into two occupation zones as well. In the West, you see capitalism, and in the East, you see communism. Okay, and West Berlin was just a pain in the butt, or a thorn in the side of Joseph Stalin. It drove him crazy that within his occupation zone, there was a little piece of capitalism, and he wanted it gone. And the way that Joseph Stalin works, and the way that his mind computes things, is that in order to get rid of capitalism in West Berlin, he needs to bring them to their knees. He needs to cripple West Berlin and make the people give in. So what he does is he basically forms a blockade around West Berlin. He cuts off supply lines, guards, whatever it takes, to not let supplies in and out of West Berlin. Now, the United States, as we talked about in the last video, had recently published an idea called the Truman Doctrine, in that anybody facing the threat of a communist takeover would be assisted by the United States. And this counts for West Berlin as well. So what does the United States do? We respond with flights, okay, flying over the top of West Berlin and dropping in necessary supplies to survive. We're talking food and basic necessities. Okay. And we're not just talking a little bit. Berlin's a big city, right? They need a lot of stuff. We're talking over 5,000 tons a day. Okay. 5,000 tons daily for 11 months. Okay. Eventually, Stalin gets aggravated and, calls off the dogs, and West Berlin and capitalism survive. Now, this is a huge move by the United States and Harry Truman, because when the rest of the world was trying to decide what's right, is capitalism right, is communism right, how do we move forward? When the rest of the world looks at this small little happening in West Berlin, they say, do I want to be part of a regime that takes people down and gets things from people by punishing them? Or do I want to be part of a system that drops in, thousands and thousands of pounds of supplies to free people every day, to protect people and the ideas of democracy? So do I want a ruthless dictator, or do I want someone that supports people? Okay, there's all those posters that have like a little girl getting a glass of milk from the sky and saying, "Oh, milk, democracy's new weapon." Or the idea behind that is that the idea of supplying Western democratic countries with the things they need to succeed is a weapon, because people will choose the United States and capitalism over communism in the Soviet Union. All right, guys, so that's that for that video. If you have any questions, please go ahead and post them in our Google Classroom. More than happy to talk to you about that. I think there's probably a couple of things that we definitely could have dove into a little bit deeper today, but this is a review. Okay, so if you do have any questions, though, please feel free to shoot them over on a Google Classroom. Stay safe out there, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.